Welcome to the JustPeace Talanoa BURE at COVID-19. As we enter into 2021, Fiji was barely recovering from the climate crisis and disaster of Tisiyasa and major flooding that hit Fiji in January post-cyclones. Agriculture, for example, was 100% destroyed in the Northern and Western Division. Major parts of the country were struggling to rebuild shelters. At Transcend Oceania, we engaged in humanitarian responses to provide the much-needed psychosocial support back-to-back in the communities of Mbua, the Konrove, and Maduata provinces. In the process, we were met with the need to engage in schools as students were placed in difficult situations and challenges. Classrooms were destroyed, and relocations of students impacted on behavioral changes. And then COVID-19 re-entered, and schools were again shut down for a few months or most part of the year. We were battered, and we acknowledged in sorrow that in the process we have lost loved ones. May they rest in power. And we are also survivors, and here with us are representatives from students' associations and peace custodians and advocates, Paulini Tusulu, and youth leader representative, Eparama Laveti, whom are the storytellers of the moment for JustPeace Community and progressive peace and development from students and youth representatives. Join us at the Talanoa with our host and moderator, Justine Maravu, who is the project officer of Transcend Oceania.
Welcome to the JustPeace Talanoa BURE at COVID-19, a platform that brings together community representatives, leaders, women and youths to share stories and priorities that hold value to them, their people, and Vanua. Through their experiences, there is also lessons learned, recommendations, possible solutions and plans to the current situation. Joining us today is Eparama Laveti, a university student, and Paulini Tusulu, a youth representative of the Catholic Church in Suva. Welcome to the Talanoa BURE. We shall start with our Talanoa. Now tell us, what do you value most about your culture? What are some of the traditional practices that the older generation value most from your community? Paulini?
Thank you so much, Justine, for that question. I think one thing that I value most from culture would definitely be the value of respect, the virtue of respect. I truly admire how the older generations used to make sure that everything they do revolved around respect, you know, in terms of respect to their family, respect to their faith, their beliefs, respect to their vanua, the land, the sea, respect to their community as a whole as well, in terms of traditional protocols, you know, the simple things like saying chilo when passing, and also the taboos put in place. All of that is just their form of showing respect, and that is one thing that I think most of the Fijian communities tend to keep and uphold, and yeah, that's what I truly admire and value the most from culture.
Menakapau, Eparama?
For any Pacific Islander culture, I think family is the most valuable thing that we have. You know, being able to see them, being able to get together, and just having a conversation with them. But given the current situation, it's something that we cannot do. So I think, yeah, family bond is something that we hold dearest to our heart as Pacific Islander people.
Thank you very much for that. You've both mentioned something that is valuable and something that we hold dear to our heart, that is family and respect. Now, what are some of the emerging issues of concern that you see around you, you know, the changes that are happening, and who are the most affected from your perspective? Eparama?
In my local community, I think the youth mostly impacted. Given the current situation, unemployment is on the rise. So a lot of youths are struggling now to put food on the table. When I go out for shopping, I see a lot of my friends selling coconuts on the roadside, just trying to survive and trying to put food on the table. So I think that's one of the major issues that we are currently facing now is unemployment given the current pandemic.
Thank you, Eparama. Paulini?
Yeah, one of the emerging issues that I think is a main concern would be the way of life now and then, because given this current pandemic, there are so many restrictions and it's so sudden that ways of life have changed. Comparing, about 2 years ago and to now, adults and a lot of older people put in a position where they don't know how to act because it's such a sudden change, and then some people are laid off. Food security is very unsteady. All this is arising and it really gets to us in terms of mental health and physical health even. So I think that's one of the emerging concerns for me. And speaking also from a young person's view, I think the amount of attention that we give to technology has greatly influenced us in the way we act and what we do. And it really confuses us, because, again, because of the current situation. So yeah, that's just what I'd like to share. Thank you.
Thank you. So building on from what you have shared, Pau and Eparama, now looking back 5 to 10 years ago as a young person, what do you see, have changed and why? Eparama?
Yes, looking back 5 to 10 years ago, something that has become an issue now is, one of the major issues now is, climate change. 5 to 10 years ago, it was an issue that wasn't widely discussed as now. Now there are efforts for climate change adaptation. People are engaging in conversation, in dialogues of how to mitigate the effects of climate change and how we are able to better adapt to the effects that it has had on our communities and our country as a whole, and even our region. So I think that is one of the major change that has happened looking back 5 to 10 years ago. Youths and local communities are now getting more engaged in conservation efforts. NGOs advocating for more sustainable behavior from people. So I think that is one of the major changes that has happened.
Thank you, Eparama. Thank you for watching JustPeace Talanoa BURE at COVID-19. Stay tuned. We will be back after this break. Welcome again to our JustPeace Talanoa BURE at COVID-19. To continue with our Talanoa, Pau, looking back 5 to 10 years ago, what has changed and why?
On that question, I completely agree with Eparama. Climate change, 5 to 10 years back, it wasn't as serious. When compared to now, looking at all these articles and news on climate change and how it's taking its toll over humanity. And at the same time, I'd like to mention the pandemic, which is one of the biggest changes that we've overcome so far. Given the situation that we're all restricted to many things, we're given new boundaries, and because of that, we have to adapt to new changes. And sadly, it has become the new normal for us. At the same time, and a good example would be school, how we always had face-to-face learning and now it's kind of turned to online learning. I think it's also a big change and it has its cons to it as well, because not many children have the resources to access that. And yeah, that's just one of the biggest changes that I've seen so far as a student.
Thank you, Pau. From what you have shared, Eparama and Pau, what are the processes that are working within your community, your groups, and probably share what are some of the challenges too. Eparama?
Yes, as I've mentioned, the high rate of unemployment for youths now in my community, they've resorted to backyard farming as a way to put food on the table. You know, before they were going for jobs in Suva, and now that has been sort of limited. Some of them have been laid off, so now they've resorted to backyard farming. And at the same time, youths have formed a group to help other families in starting their own backyard farming, and they are getting paid for it. So that is a way, that is a process in which they are able to gain money and at the same time, have food on the table for their families. And but one of the challenges to that is that the ease of access to markets, it has been greatly limited, and now they cannot sell their produce on roadsides. They have to have certain facilities where they can go to sell their produce. So I think that is one of the challenge to youths who are resorting to backyard farming is market access.
Thank you, Eparama. Pau?
In terms of processes that are put in place to help cope with such issues, just the other day I was having a meeting with some of the youth executives of my youth group, and we were talking about putting together or scheduling a time to have Talanoa sessions, amongst the youth on how they are coping with this pandemic and what they're going through right now, just to check up on their mental health, because I believe that's really a really important thing to talk about right now. This is such a hard time that we're going through, and I feel that we always need to check up on each other. And at the same time, the other challenges would be child labor, because people are undergoing things right now, trying to put food on their table. Children are going out to sell and whatnot, which I think is good because they are trying to help, but at the same time, they are at risk because, once again, we're in a pandemic. And because of that, there's also this thing, I'm actually I'm a child advisor under Child Rights Connect, and we are drafting a child-friendly guide on child human rights defenders. And I think that this is a great opportunity and a process that is put in place for children to be aware of their rights and what they can do. And one of them is the right to education. And right now, it's kind of unsteady here, knowing that we're in lockdown. And every child has the right to be educated. So these are just some of the processes that help children become aware of what they have the right to. And I think that people just need to work around that, be considerate of that and people's mental health. Thank you.
Thank you, Paulini, and thank you, Eparama, for those wonderful insights. And groups are working together in terms of, going through this hard time. Thank you for, sharing those thoughts. Thank you for watching JustPeace Talanoa at COVID-19. Stay with us. We will be back after this break. Welcome back to our JustPeace Talanoa at COVID-19. We'll continue with our Talanoa, Pau and Eparama. Now, what are some of the recommendations that you would like to pose in terms of looking at positive changes in your community or in your group? Eparama?
Some of the recommendations that can be made is that for relevant authorities to be more lenient on people who are trying to sell their produce to make a living, is to provide more access to markets so that they're able to put food on the table, and for community leaders to have safe spaces where youths can virtually converse on the challenges that they are facing and ways that they can overcome those challenges in ways they can adapt to the challenges they are facing. To have that space where youths can converse about the certain situations they are in and how people can help in adapting to that situation.
Thank you, Eparama. That's a very interesting and a good point as well, looking at the concerns of young people in this country. Paulini?
As I mentioned earlier, the problem of children not being able to access education, online education, because of the lack of resources. I think that it would be, the government should provide ways and provide the materials, the resources to these very children that don't have the resources to access online education, to, provide them with that, because once again, every child has the right to education, and I think that it is very important for this to be helped in any way that it can be. And at the same time, I would personally recommend other youth out there to engage in such conversations, and in conversations that that include such issues, so that they can be more aware of what's happening around them, and so that they can be able to voice out their opinions on such situations, so that we as a community and a nation know what they are up to and what they're feeling, what they think is right, because we all know that the youth are the future of the nation. So yeah, I just think it's important for them to engage in such conversations in any way that they can.
Thank you very much, Pau. Very important insights from a young student, secondary school student, with a concern of education. Now, is there anything else you would like to share with the audience, Eparama and Pau? We'll go with Eparama.
Yes. Given the climate change that we are experiencing right now, we must make a change towards a more sustainable way of life. Making small changes such as limiting your plastic use, within your families. Small changes they'll eventually accumulate to a big change, and I think that is something that we should strive for. And I think so. The importance of education and awareness, educating people, the youths, communities on climate change, its effects, how we can adapt to it, and COVID, the current pandemic. I think if people are more aware of what is happening around them, only then that they can make a change on things that they need to do to adapt and to mitigate this certain crisis that we're in.
Thank you, Eparama. Pau?
I completely agree with Eparama on that one. Making people aware of the things that are happening around them so that they can make a change. And at the same time, I forgot to mention earlier about the use of technology and how it's like one of the biggest, the most common sources of communication now. I think that we could use these platforms, like social media, to, tell on the message and to educate more younger people on such issues, just like he said, because yet again, that's where most of our attention is going towards. So yeah, just that, and just to be safe, use the internet wisely. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Pau. Thank you, Eparama. We have come to the end of our episode. Thank you very much for watching JustPeace Talanoa at COVID-19.
As we conclude our JustPeace Talanoa at COVID-19, we are reminded once again to enable people living just peace and nonviolence in Oceania. We need to be both mindful and maintain safety protocol, mask up, home isolation may be tough while caring for each other, and at the same time, our need for peace and stability within the safety of our homes and communities and the nation at large is of vital importance. Building just peace communities in changing environment and climate. Let's also continue the importance of Talanoa. I'm Adi Vasulevu. Join us at the same time next week.